Is a plan to arm staff members up at the Spirit Lake Community School District devastating? Let's talk about it. Hi, everybody. I'm John McLaughlin, your host and chair of Warrior Wednesday here on the Iowa Firearms Coalition. And you'll have to forgive a little bit of coughing or sniffling right now as the ragweed season is in high gear, and until it freezes, I'll be suffering with that. So the big news in the last week since our last Warrior Wednesday has been up in Spirit Lake, Dickinson County, beautiful part of the state with Lake Okoboji, Spirit Lake, and a lot of good stuff up there. And this school district has been the groundbreaker. So the school board, the school staff, the local police department, and the county sheriff have all got together and worked out a plan to train and arm up to 10 staff members. So this is certainly big news for Iowa. This does not mean that they're simply going to say, hey, do you have a concealed carry permit? Stop by the superintendent's office, fill out some paperwork. We're going to give you your school issued Glock 19. No, there's a significant amount of training that is going to be going into this. And again, it's a well thought out training program. I've been in contact with the superintendent up there and offered whatever help as an organization we can provide for them. And also invited them down to a seminar we'll be doing in December with the leading expert on the active shooter situation, that is Ed Monk. So let's talk a little bit about the response to this. I'm going to do a screen share here if I can. And here we go. So one of the best responses has been from our own IFC president, Dave Funk. And you can see it here on our Facebook page. The Spirit Lake School Board clearly loves their children enough to ensure, should tragedy strike, that a threat can be addressed. We strongly encourage all other Iowa school districts to follow in the footsteps of Spirit Lake. Our children are worth protecting. So good stuff there from IFC President Funk. Now, as you might expect, the response has been a little less than positive from virtually everybody else. So the politicians in Iowa on the more liberal side of things, you might say, top Iowa Democrats say Spirit Lake Schools gun plan is devastating. So the article, which has been shared all over on various media outlets across the state, both radio and television, talks on the current gun laws, which the Iowa Firearms Coalition has been behind for decades. We've got the shell issue permit process in 2010, and now we've moved on to constitutional carry or permitless carry. But it says here that Republicans at the State House have put Iowa gun laws on a downward spiral, leading to the plan to have 10 Spirit Lake school staff carry guns. Spirit Lake officials announced that this week, that with permits for concealed weapons, they'd be trained to quickly respond to shooting at Spirit Lake schools. However, teachers will not have guns in the classroom. Talk more about that in a minute. Iowa Democratic Party Chairman Ross Wilburn is also a state representative from Ames, and he has voted against allowing guns in Iowa schools. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. First of all, guns have been allowed in Iowa schools with permission from the overriding management of the various school districts, whether that's a school board, superintendent. So with permission, in the past, somebody could have been trained and actually been able to respond to an active threat at a school. But so far, we haven't seen a lot of that at our public schools. We have, however, at our private schools, the Christian schools, things like that. We do have armed security in place. Now, the Des Moines School District for several years had the school resource officer, where they at least had one trained police officer that would be on school property or at least nearby. But let's get into the weeds on this a little bit. So we appreciate that the Second Amendment is for everyone, no matter what part of the political spectrum you're on. Religious spectrum doesn't make any difference. 2A is for all. That is why we have been pushing so hard for protection of the Second Amendment in Iowa, since the Iowa Constitution actually doesn't have that in it right now, but we'll be putting that on the ballot on November 8th. So flip over your ballot, turn it for 2A, and go to that Freedom Amendment, or at least you'll see the language about the right to keep and bear arms in Iowa. Make sure you sign that. But let's get back to this issue. We want to mitigate the threat on all schools, businesses, and churches. So we do all the things that if you looked at this property as if you were one of the bad guys and thought about how I would get on here, how I would enter, do all these things, and reverse that and put up our defenses, we would have cameras, we would have fences, we would have people monitoring the playgrounds during recess. We would have people in the lunchroom as we were getting the students gathered together, whether that's before school, during lunch, during a break, or waiting after school for parents. All these high-risk things, we would put people in place to watch, observe, and quickly be able to respond. Well, the schools have done some things. They've got locked door policies. They've got various shooter drill things where they go into the corner or try to get away from the visibility through a window and hide. But what happens on the day when all those things don't work? So in the firearms training world, we have a process called left of bang, which is kind of what I've discussed, where bang is the event, the active shooter, the bombing overseas, that kind of things. This was developed with General Mattis and the Marine Corps back during the Gulf Wars, and we wanted to mitigate this threat of injury and harm to our soldiers. And that was by identifying things that are out of place, that don't fit the baseline. So for instance, let's apply this to your school, your church. You see someone that you haven't seen before, they're lingering around, they may be dressed differently, but maybe not, but their behavior doesn't fit what is normal on the playground. You're not used to seeing adults coming up and observing children. Or somebody, in the case of Uvalde, walks onto the school ground with a rifle. All right, that doesn't fit the baseline, so you must immediately put these things into action to stop that threat before harm can be done. But we continue over the last several decades to have seen failure after failure after failure to stop the threat before it gets into the school. So despite best efforts in many schools, including Uvalde, Texas, the bad man got onto campus and started to cause harm. So the Democratic response that we've seen in these articles that are coming out are guns at school are bad. Okay, certainly guns in the hand of a bad man on school is bad, right? But how are you going to stop the threat without someone physically having a presence at that school? You simply can't. Ed Monk, we've talked about him. We've had him on 2 different segments on the Iowa Firearms Coalition, and let's just talk about that a little bit. If you go to our YouTube page or any of our Facebook pages, I've actually posted, he did a 1-hour talk just for us that goes through basically a compressed seminar that he'll actually be bringing to Des Moines in December 11th. And you can go to our IFC events page and scroll down and actually sign up for that. If you're a school administrator, church administrator, safety member, police officer, things like that, please sign up and attend this, because it has all the good information that I'm going to describe a little bit here in a moment. So let's just talk about this, and I'm not going to show the slides, but math and time are the 2 things that Ed preaches. So if a killer gets onto your school ground, 2 things are known. The longer they're on your school ground, the more people are going to be shot or killed. It's as simple as that. And the average over the length that these events typically run, which the killing usually lasts 3 or 4 minutes, is about 10 victims per minute. But it's higher in the beginning. So when someone gets access to lots of people, whether it's a classroom, lunchroom, whatever, out on the playground, the victims, the count is highest in that first 60 seconds to 2 minutes. So Ed is saying, if you're going to have a legitimate safety plan for your church, your school, your business, it has to be a plan that includes somebody to immediately go to the gunfire and deal with the threat even before responding police officers can get there. Because if you pick up the phone, you call 911, and it takes 3 or 4 minutes, your body count could already be into the teens or 20s. And what we have seen over time is these killers, especially the young killers, are trying to get the new body count, the new high count. And we certainly want to stop that. So I didn't see anything in any of these articles from folks that are saying no guns in schools, this is a horrible idea, this is devastating. Well, as Dave Funk pointed out, the loss of life of our children is devastating, and we absolutely want to stop that. And then I get good friends of mine that say, well, John, this is like the risk of a school shooting is probably somewhere less than being struck by lightning. And that most likely is true. So that doesn't mean that we're going to go fishing in the middle of a thunderstorm or continue playing golf when lightning is nearby, right? Because that definitely would increase the chance. So we can't predict what is going to happen into the future and where the next lightning strike will be at a school or church or a place of business. So we want to use math and time on our side. And that is exactly the kind of the flow chart that the Spirit Lake School District worked out, saying if for some reason this would ever happen and we can't stop it before it gets to our campus through all the different means of physical security, we have to have folks that are willing to say the lives of these children are more important than anything else, and I'm going to immediately move to the gunfire and deal with this threat, because the longer it goes on, the higher the victim count will be. And usually, again, the first couple minutes, it really racks up, and then the shooter starts looking for other victims. Things slow down a little bit, but it averages over time about 10 per minute, but again, higher early on. So the superintendent in particular said, we must stop this immediately. And he went to law enforcement and they worked as a team to not only say, let's get people on our campuses willing, but folks who will be there and folks that will have the proper mindset and training to deal with the threat. So you'll notice they said no teachers. So we're not going to put that right now, at least in Spirit Lake, in the hands of the teachers, although there may be several teachers that in the future, especially in other schools, may say, hey, I'm a combat veteran. I've got tons of training. I've done these active shooter drills. I'd be willing to take the training and stay up to speed. But for now, and we certainly are supporting the moves that Spirit Lake is taking, it's for up to 10. So if you go to Ed's seminars, again, coming to Des Moines, December 11th, he's going to talk about having the right number of people based on the size of your facility. Because again, it's having someone in place that can be there within that first 30 seconds to a minute. And the 30 seconds is a lot better than the 1 minute. And you saw some things in the press from some of the school board members saying that they're not necessarily gun fans, but they are fans of children. And one school board member actually has kids on 4 different grade levels. So you can see 30 seconds, that's the time window we're talking about getting somebody in place. So whether that's a coach, whether it's a cook, whether it's a bus driver who can be there during the day, whatever the position, whatever the people are, they're going to be trained. So I've seen reports in the media saying, oh, we're just handing out these firearms. No, again, we're not. The training program that these folks that will be going through is extensive. There's a company up in the Spirit Lake area, Peterson Firearms. It's actually run by a law enforcement officer, so that's a good thing. And they are high-level folks up there. I just had a friend of mine, Riley Bowman, back in May, was up there actually training their people. And I can tell you what, if Riley is coming to your firearms organization and providing training, those are the kind of people that I want training the school members, the church security staff, things like that. So when I heard that, it was like, wow, okay, they are really doing their due diligence and making sure they're getting good training for these people. And I'm nearly positive that the training will continue, throughout the school year, not just here's your gun, go out and do your thing. So that is good news there. So what can you as a member of IFC do? Number one, support Spirit Lake. So as we predicted, as soon as the news got out on this, we talked about it on IFC. Michael Ware, our past chair and current board member, was on some of the local media up in Northwest Iowa. I can tell you the folks in Spirit Lake have the full weight of the anti-gun establishment coming down on them right now. So whether it's legislators, whether it is the media, everybody is saying, what a horrible idea. But I tell you what, look those people in the face and say, how many victims are okay with you? So if the cops can be there in 4 minutes or 5 minutes, are you okay with 30 people shot at your school district? Or is it 20? Are you comfortable with 20 dead? Or how about 15? Because hope is not a strategy in mitigating the risk in these things. The only thing that works is someone with a warrior mindset They have settled things in their heart and their soul that they will move toward the gunfire and they will put an end to this threat. Those are the people we need. That is the only solution right now. Again, it's a low probability incident. These people most likely in Spirit Lake will spend their entire careers and never fire a shot in defense of the kids. And that's certainly what we want. But if the day comes, the only plan that works is having people there. And we are certainly pro law enforcement at the Iowa Firearms Coalition. Goodness sakes, we are. But they can't be everywhere. And they can't be there in the first 30 seconds unless you're going to hire them to be in your building all the time. So again, just think, who can be there in the first 30 seconds? Or what if that person is gone today? Who's filling in for them? How many people do we need based on our buildings that we have? What if the person is on the 4th floor of the building and there's gunshots on the ground floor or the 2nd floor? How long is it going to take to go down the stairs and start moving down the hallway and pieing all the corners and doors and figuring out where the threat is? Think 30 seconds to help mitigate those big numbers that we've been seeing in the media. So I just wanted to, number one, lend our support to Spirit Lake, shoot down the garbage that we're seeing in the media right now. These folks love to spout, no guns, no guns, guns are horrible. And it's the only answer is a good person, a trained person, a moral person, and someone, again, who has made that decision that they don't have to think in the moment, oh, am I willing to do this or not? Though they've already made that decision before they ever start this training program, and they're willing to do what's required on the worst day. So again, hope Spirit Lake never sees that, but want to at least thank them right now at this point for starting a program, for taking the slings and arrows that are coming from all over. And folks, just encourage them through social media, through Twitter, their Facebook, whatever you can find, to basically pour praise on these folks up in Spirit Lake and say, hey, well done. We have your back. We support you, and we want to model a program in our local area based on what you're doing. So again, IFC has been a big supporter of this. We have been moving slowly but surely through the legislative process to help make things like this a little bit easier, with always safety in mind, but being able to protect when protection is required. So let's jump back to the share screen here and see if we can come up with a couple other things. So I'm going to reshare the screen. So back to the IFC webpage. And I'm going to scroll up here. And let's start with this. So what can you do? So you'll see there in the middle of our page, it says volunteer for IFC. So IFC is a totally volunteer organization, and our board is typically made of about a half dozen folks that love the Second Amendment, love freedom, and love people. And we're always trying to work all this together to provide the maintaining of your God-given rights and also getting people trained and squared away so that if they ever have to use a firearm in self-defense, that it's a good outcome. So here's some of our needs where you could really help us as we continue to help across the entire state. We need folks that help organize events. So for instance, I mentioned if you go to our events page, Ed Monk is coming in December to talk about the active shooter threat. That's a 4-hour seminar. That's from 1 to 5 on a Sunday. It's free. So go to our events page and sign up if you're wanting to get the real information. I've just briefly touched on a little bit of his information, but he's got all the facts going back for 2 decades about these school shootings and really what works and what doesn't. And what works, as he's documented, is 90% plus success rate by instantly getting somebody there in that first 30 seconds to minute. We do a lot of social media stuff. And again, we're all volunteers. We don't have somebody that we are paying to be on our board or to be a volunteer for us, but we need help with graphics. So if maybe that's something you do professionally and you want to lend a couple hours a week to help us with our mailers and things like that. We need folks doing video producing and editing. All we're doing, just like me, sitting here in front of, excuse me, on a Zoom screen. We need other folks doing that and getting us content. We need help with blogging on our social media. It is obvious as we go through time in the current political state that our message is going to continue to get clamped down on. So even my personal Facebook pages, used to be all weather and aviation. And as I've taught a little bit of 2A stuff in there now, the audience has just been contracted very greatly. So as we look at other platforms, we haven't had time to go anywhere right now besides the Facebook and YouTube and maybe just a little bit on Instagram. We're needing folks to help with that, and volunteers for actual shows. We're trying to do more things as far as going to the gun shows in Iowa, setting up these training events, working with the various ranges to promote medical training along with firearms training. That all needs to be done, but it can't happen with just a couple of us hanging around here trying to do everything during the day. And most of the staff members have full-time jobs in addition to doing this. So we are often working from very early in the morning to very late at night to do our normal daily activities and get the IFC stuff going. So if you can lend a hand and volunteer at all, please do. So if you go down just a little bit here, I recently talked with Richard Rogers, and Richard is our lobbyist. So here was the Warrior Wednesday last week. I would encourage you to go and play this video, because we're getting lots of comments in the media now about the Freedom Amendment. And that is what's coming up on the vote on the 8th of November. The Freedom Amendment protects the constitutional right to keep and bear arms in Iowa. So there was a recent Supreme Court decision with Bruin versus the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, which basically said this is not a second-class right. You know, the right to keep and bear arms is for everyone and should not be constricted in any way, shape, or form. And so we're getting some blowback on that in Iowa. So watch this video, learn a little bit more about the Freedom Amendment, how this recent Bruin decision helps with that as far as keeping states and local governments from impacting that. You need to be knowledgeable because, again, with our limited amount of people and resources, you know, we can only share the word so far. The more you can do as a 2A fan and going to your local coffee shops and your local Facebook pages and things like that, and sharing what it really is and being able to have the information to shoot down the inaccuracies, the better off we're all going to be. So I am going to just move my page here a little bit so I can. So here's an email. If you could just kind of look in the middle of my email screen that went out, and it's talking a little bit about the Spirit Lake thing. It says the Spirit Lake School approved a resolution to put guns in schools. The school superintendent chose 10 or fewer on-campus staff. Here it goes. It's common sense. Guns don't belong in schools. It says last year, Governor Reynolds signed into law legislation allowing weapons and firearms on school grounds. That is totally inaccurate. The legislation also limited non-federal background checks and permit carry requirements. So they have mixed up some stuff there. So background checks are still required to purchase a firearm. That is a federal system that the gun dealers all have to have you fill out the 4473 form if you're going to purchase a firearm through a dealer. So what they're talking about there doesn't make sense. And then it says making it easier for felons and domestic abusers to purchase lethal weapons. Again, that's not true. If you're a felon, you still can't purchase a firearm in Iowa. You still have to have the background check. If that shows up on the background check, your background check is going to be denied. So what I'm saying here, this is going out to the Democratic Party across the state, these emails, is you need to have the truth and know what is accurate and what is not accurate and where they have taken things and mixed them together. So that video we just talked about with Richard kind of mixes that all together. And the final thing I'm going to mention before we wrap up is we are having a ton of email about a story that was on Ammo Land and has been on YouTube of our three-letter agencies showing up at people's houses and asking for legal items that they purchased, because now the ATF has reversed its decision, and what used to be legal, they now decided isn't legal, but you've ordered it and you paid for it and went through the proper process, the Form 1, all these different things. We are working on that within the state and with our lawmakers in Washington. So we have been in contact with Senator Grassley to try to explain this situation to him. Senator Ernst, we have, again, requested time to explain this. And you will probably say she's not been a fan of 2A in Iowa lately. And while that certainly may be true, she is still a lawmaker in Washington and deserves our time to help inform her as to what is going on and use her position to go to these three-letter agencies and say, hey, what you're doing is wrong. It's illegal. You can't just be showing up and knocking on people's doors and saying, hey, would you sign this? I'm taking these legally obtained items away from you. So know that that process is undergoing. Follow us here at Iowa Firearms Coalition. We will keep you up to date, but we have started the conversation. We will keep our pedal on the gas and try to make sure our lawmakers who may not be, Second Amendment fans as far as, owning, carrying and things like that, but we want them to be informed, and we will keep you up to date on the reaction that we are getting from them. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. So a little bit of a news update. Number one, we support Spirit Lake, and we want you to support them too, and be ready to shoot down all the garbage and the lies that are being spread about the school district up there and the local law enforcement who are backing them up. Educate yourself what is going on with the Freedom Amendment. Use our tools on the Iowa Firearms Coalition Facebook page, and of course our webpage at iowafc.org. You can read about the Freedom Amendment. Watch that video from last week with Richard Rogers, because it gets into what's called strict scrutiny. And that's something that we put in as we started this process more than 12 years ago, to make sure that if this was ever called into question, the highest level of judicial review would be required. Well, we are trying to be proactive and look out into the future. We didn't know that the Bruin decision would be coming down the line. And basically the Supreme Court says, hey, you have to look at the context and the history of the Constitution. So for now, that overrides everything. So what we were trying to do with the strict scrutiny basically now has bumped it up even above that with the Supreme Court decision. So Richard talks about that, but I just want you to be informed so you can continue and have good, truthful discussions with your folks that may not think quite the same way as you do. And then finally, we are monitoring what's going on with the overreach. It continues. It has really ramped up, unfortunately, over the last several months, and we expect it to continue to do so. We don't want the rights of law-abiding, good, honest, and prudent, moral people to have their rights violated or feel intimidated by the federal agents coming to their doors. So join us, Iowa Firearms Coalition. Consider volunteering to help us out, because we certainly need your help. And tell folks about that Freedom Amendment. Again, they'll have to flip the ballot over. It ended up on the backside of the ballot. So turn over for 2A and help us have that big win as all the forces of evil are coming down upon us to try to stop that from succeeding in Iowa. But I think we will be successful. The truth is on our side, and certainly the Second Amendment in Iowa go hand in hand. So I'm John McLaughlin. Thanks for listening to me kind of rattle on tonight with the allergies and allergy meds and all that. So have a great evening. Stay in the fight. This is your time in history right now to stand up, to have a position, to be strong in that position, to know the facts, and be ready to defend them.